presentation. So Amy and I are here to speak with you about the problem of food waste, its effect on cost and climate change, and what we as individuals and as smaller communities can do about it. We're going to do a presentation of about 15 or 20 minutes, give or take, and then open it up to a discussion or Q&A afterwards. And during the presentation, if anything comes to mind, please feel free to put it into the chat. Emmy or I will be monitoring it. We'll be sure to address any questions or comments that you have either at the end or right in the middle. And we'll start off with some intros. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. So my name's Christina Zardo, and I'm the manager of Municipal Solutions at Food Cycle Science. And what that means is that it's my job to help municipalities and communities keep food waste out of landfills using our technology and our solution. And a little bit of history about myself, I have a little over a decade of experience working in the traditional waste industry. I worked for companies like Waste Connections of Canada and GFL Environmental. I worked on the hauling divisions and in post-collection as well, taking care of sorting, waste and recycling, selling commodities, and making sure that material is kept out of landfill as much as possible. And I'm also a small business owner where I do a waste audit and reduction plans for commercial, municipal, and institutional sector clients. So in my entire professional career, I've been talking trash and trying to divert as much waste as possible. So this is what I'm passionate about, and I'm excited to tell you about, food cycle science, what we do, and how this is kind of the future, in my opinion, of food waste. But before we get into that, I will let Emmy introduce herself.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Emmy Gagnier. I don't have a very extensive resume like Christina, but I am the project coordinator within the Municipal Solutions team at Food Cycle Science. And outside of this job, I'm also the chair of the Youth Engagement Committee for a nonprofit and also a decolonization coordinator, and I consider myself an environmentalist. I'd also like to acknowledge that Christina and I are calling in as guests from the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, so also known as Ottawa, Ontario. And just a little bit about me, I'm very passionate about, centering conversations around sustainability, circular economy. I'm an advocate for community-based learning and increasing youth engagement within the decision-making and the political sphere, and also raising awareness about, sustainable waste management practices and, how that affects our future and future generations. So it's wonderful to be here and to have this chat with everyone. And we hope that you learn a lot about what we do and who we are. So yeah, let's get started. So to start off, just a little bit about Food Cycle Science. So Food Cycle Science is a company born from the alarming fact that over 63% of food waste is avoidable and responsible for up to 10% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. So at Food Cycle Science, we've developed this innovative solution called the Food Cycler that reduces food waste in landfills, takes trucks off the road, reduces infrastructure and collection costs, and contributes to a 95% reduction in CO2 emissions when compared to sending food waste to landfill. So our in-home food recycler is sold directly to consumers through partners like Vitamix and Breville, and our Municipal Solutions team, so where Christina and I are currently working with, we have a residential program which helps municipalities divert more food waste and reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with waste. Next slide, yeah. So we work with many small, rural, and remote and northern communities. So as of today, we have over 37 Canadian municipalities across 7 provinces and territories who have signed on to the Food Cycler program. And so we have a few in Northwestern Ontario, such as Terrace Bay, Kenora, and Meebing. And so let's talk a little bit about why food waste is such a problem. So according to the United Nations, 17% of globally produced food each year is wasted. And unfortunately, Canada is one of the most wasteful countries. So we waste about 79 kilograms of food per year at home, compared to the US, which is 59 kilograms, and the UK at 77 kilograms. So Canada has identified food waste as a critical issue And so wasted food has, environmental, economic, and social consequences. Our current food waste management requires, as you all know, resources to manage its disposal and diversion, which is usually passed on to municipal utilities and services. And the irony about food waste is that it is avoidable. In fact, like it's on the slide, 63% of food waste is actually avoidable. Yet it accounts for such a large portion of our household food waste. And on top of that, it's made out of mostly liquid, which is heavy and freezes in the winter, as you're all aware of the Canadian winter, making it very difficult to transport. And, any food waste that sneaks through and ends up in our landfill is responsible for generating harmful greenhouse gases, contributing to the impacts of climate change that we're seeing today. And food waste is costly. So all of these factors makes it so that, food waste is a problem with a strong municipal impact, which Christina will kind of talk more about.
Yeah, so food waste is a massive problem in Canada and around the world. And here in Canada, like it or not, waste management is a municipal responsibility. So what that means for municipal governments is that you have considerations such as cost. So a landfill in a small community is a costly asset if you need to expand or close down and build a new one to the tune of many millions of dollars. And on top of that, if you provide waste collection and disposal services, this is a major cost to a municipality and ultimately to our taxpayers. And then, as Emmy mentioned, there is a major environmental impact to putting food waste in the landfill. So when you put food waste in a landfill, because it's so tightly compacted, this anaerobic environment, which means without air, doesn't allow the food waste to break down properly. And in this case, it will create what's called methane. This is a greenhouse gas that is many times more harmful than CO2. And to put that into perspective, 1 ton of food waste creating methane in a landfill is equivalent to having 1 car on the road for an entire year. So this is no joke. It is contributing to the impacts of climate change that we're seeing today. I'm here in Ottawa. The power is out at my house. I had to clean out my fridge, and I'm really worried about how much food waste is going to be going into the landfill when our entire community has to clean out their fridges and freezers. I was very diligent in putting it all into my green bin, but I really doubt that the majority of people in Ottawa are doing the same, and that makes me very sad. And then, so in our community, the last kind of impact that we want to consider here is that when we have food waste in our garbage cans sitting outside our house, creating odors, it's very interesting for animals like bears, coyotes, raccoons, skunks, rats, and other vermin. Now, these are unwanted visitors in our households. And so we want to avoid having that as much as possible. But the only way to do it is to take food waste out of the garbage. So by doing that, you can reduce your volume, you can reduce your smells. And it's good to see a couple faces on here. I know we have some people from Nebing. We have a client in Terrace Bay as well who uses the food cycler. And they tell me stories about having bears in the community and needing to come out and shoot the bears because they're posing a safety risk to the community. They're attracted to the smells of our food waste. If we can avoid that, I think that would go a long way for our community and the wildlife and living in harmony and doing the right thing. And so, we get asked all the time, well, haven't we solved this already? There are some solutions out there that really work. One of them is curbside collection of green bins for source separated organic waste. This is a great solution, but it's really meant for big cities that have high population density, that can benefit from economies of scale, and that can afford an expensive investment in infrastructure because it has to go somewhere once it's collected. So if you don't have a processing facility in the area, then there's nowhere to take it. So this wouldn't work. And then we have backyard composting. So this is really wonderful and we love it. And if you do it, please continue. We're not trying to change your habits here. Backyard composting is wonderful, but the reality here is that people will often not have the ability to do it. They may not have the space. They may not have the desire to do it at home. It can be labor intensive. It may only be a seasonal practice. And the reality is that adoption rates on backyard composting have been low and stagnant for decades. So not a whole lot of people are joining into the backyard composting train. Lastly, what we can do is continue to landfill our organics, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. There are environmental and cost impacts here, and there's a better way to do it. So we'll talk to you a little bit about what we've come up with, and that would be the food cycler. So we've essentially built a small kitchen appliance. It's about the size of a bread machine, if that means anything to you, where you have a bucket that goes into the machine and you put your food scraps in there right from your kitchen. That can include things like meat, fish, poultry, dairy, even some bones. You push a button, and in a matter of hours, you have reduced your food waste by 90% in weight and volume. And what you've generated is a beneficial soil amendment that you can then feed back into the earth. So with our technology, what we can process is about a kilogram or 2.5 liters of wet, smelly food waste per cycle. And when you cycle that, it takes between 4 and 8 hours to complete and uses less than a kilowatt hour of power per cycle. So very little electrical draw. It's about the same as having a computer plugged in for the same amount of time. As I mentioned at the end, you have a huge reduction in weight and volume. And what you get is about a handful of this dry, sterile, pathogen-free, and odorless, most importantly, biomass that has many beneficial uses. You can incorporate it into your garden. You can share it with a local farm, which we've done in the community of Hornpain, which is one of our partners. It can go into existing leaf and yard systems if you have that in place, or it can go to an organics facility if you're lucky enough to have one nearby to you. We've also pelletized it into briquettes for use in home heating. It burns slow and hot, just like wood. And most importantly, it doesn't smell. So that's really interesting stuff that you can do with this biomass. And you've essentially diverted this from the landfill right at home. Now, when we look at the environmental impact, of course, putting food waste in landfill creates methane, trucking it there uses CO2 and releases a lot of greenhouse gases. But the food cycler is right in line with anaerobic digestion and backyard and central composting in terms of the environmental impact. And so what we see is that these solutions, including the food cycler, have a 95% reduction of the greenhouse gas impact associated with managing food waste. A little anecdote that's pretty interesting. One of our very first communities to trial the food cycler was Hay River up in the Northwest Territories. They're just south of Great Slave Lake. And they had a massive landfill fire in 2019, I believe. And it started because methane was trapped in the landfill. And the impact to the community was dire. And the cost to the community was to the tune of many millions of dollars. And so what they kind of woke up and realized is we need to keep this stuff out of the landfill on top of, what it does just sitting there. It can also cause some hazardous impacts. And so when we look at the economic impact, I can talk to you a little bit about traditional services with which I have a lot of experience from my past. So when we think about traditional services, we generate our waste at home, we put it into a bin or a receptacle. A hauling truck comes to pick it up, and that uses fuel, which is very expensive, and labor, which is in short supply these days. And then when you haul that material, it may go through a transfer station and ultimately it ends up in its resting place in the landfill. With this type of service, you have emissions, you have expensive, ongoing, and variable costs. They're never ending. You always have to provide this collection service, you always have to run a truck, and you always have to have a facility that can receive this material. But with the food cycler, you basically generate your food waste at home and you process it right at home. households and homeowners have, accountability over the waste that they're generating. This is a fixed cost solution. It's high yield and effective. And what that means is very high participation rates. What I've seen in my past in implementing services like green bins is that it doesn't work for everyone. There's no one size fits all solution. Here in Ottawa, we have green bin service. We're lucky enough to have it, but only 57% of people in Ottawa are using it. So 43% of people, it isn't for them, or they live in condos where it's really not manageable. In Sudbury, for example, they implemented green bins several years ago. And after a few years, they still only had 27% of their community using the service. So in Northern Ontario, I think there are some specific considerations and unique challenges to having green bins that we need to think about when we look at the suite of options we want to provide to our community. And Emmy's going to talk to you about the kind of social and regulatory impacts of what we're doing today.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. So as we've worked with many municipalities, the one thing we've really learned from working with them is that residents are actually very interested in being part of the solution. So they want to try new things, and they want options. And with the food cycler, you get to bring something innovative and tangible to your residents who might not otherwise be participating in a diversion program. So we have very high participation rates with the food cycler in comparison to green bins. There are also the impact of regulations that are coming to us in Ontario. So there are a number of diversion targets that I'm sure you're all aware that are coming into effect, and probably many more to come in the next couple of years. So it's very important to have a plan in place that meets these goals and also works for your community. In terms of positive impacts of a pilot program, we really also encourage communities to engage in community engagement. So the Food Cycler pilot project is really an opportunity to engage local communities on all levels, from the governmental, educational, and to the individual level. So on the top right image, so that's a picture from Easton Acres Farm in Hornpain. So they're a family-owned farm, and they have a drop-off bin on their property where Food Cycler users can leave their soil amendment or byproduct if they can't use it in their home garden. So if they live in an apartment building, for example, the farm then use it as a fertilizer to grow their food. So they're essentially recirculating resources. So this system has been working very well and offsets the need for that farm to use any artificial fertilizers. So we really encourage, and we also provide support for our municipal partners to establish a partnership with local community gardens, retirement homes, schools, community centers. So the Food Cycler can not only just be here, we're not just here to sell a product, but really to be here to establish a form of community engagement and think about solutions that really work for your community. So community engagement is one of the cornerstones of creating, a resilient and sustainable community, and we're here to support on that end as well. And another huge part of our work is also raising awareness about food waste and educating others about the impacts of food waste. So, we really strive to help future generations take, ownership of their food waste and shift away from the definition of, waste equals useless. And so this is why we're partnered with EcoSchools Canada and the Outdoor Learning Store. So we're really out there helping deepen students' awareness on food waste and introduce ways to recirculate their food waste sustainably. The Food Cycler for Schools provides this authentic and unique hands-on learning opportunities for students of all ages, and we're currently present in over 100 classrooms across Canada. We also do workshops with schools. So one of the activities that we did, we talked about the impacts of landfills and the municipality or the county's responsibility in managing waste management practices. And then we wrote a letter to your municipality or your future municipality, so the responsibility about how they felt about, how the responsibility of future management will fall on them in the future. And one of my most favorite quotes, the two letters that I put on the slides up here, the first one says, "Dear Ottawa Municipality, we have too much waste. We need to begin practicing sustainable ways to compost our food waste. I just had a great presentation on how we can use our Food Cycler machine to help Ottawa people be more sustainable to our planet, because before we know it, we will be living in a real life WALL-E. And as much as I think flying in a spaceship will be cool, our planet is much cooler. And I absolutely love that quote, and I will be using it everywhere I go. Another quote from a postcard that another student wrote is, I do not like dealing with previous generations' trash, and I do not want to do it to the next generation. So only we can stop it, the waste crisis, and it's about time that we did. So the food cycler itself provides, a lot of learning opportunities. So some topics that you can touch up on as school gardening. So we did, a presentation with the food cycler about innovation, clean technology, circular economy with grade 3 students who were extremely, extremely intelligent. And a student said, the food cycler is just like the circle of life. You use the byproduct to create something new. And that's absolutely what we're trying to do. So we also encourage, incorporating schools within pilot programs, and you can use the food cycler, anywhere in cafeterias, classrooms, same as in your own home. We have schools using it in our culinary arts program, agricultural studies, outdoor education. So we really encourage, our municipalities to find value of the food cycler outside of just at the individual level, and really engage at the community, young people, community centers, like I said. So anywhere you can find value and create a more engaging community. And so Christina will then finally talk to you about a short overview of how our pilot program works.
Yeah, so what we've been doing in communities across Canada for the last 2 years is piloting this technology in households and communities who are considering an organic waste solution, but can't land on green bins, and backyard composting hasn't worked, and they're just not sure where else to go. So we have pilot programs available, and basically the way that it works is residents will purchase a food cycler at a subsidized rate from their municipality, and they'll use it for about 3 months. And during that time, what they'll do is they'll track the number of times that they run a cycle or push the button. And then at the end of the 12 weeks, we'll administer a survey. And in that survey, we'll ask them, how many cycles did you run? This way we can calculate how much food waste we've diverted during that period and extrapolate that information to say, over these food cyclers in a year, you've diverted so many tons from landfill. We also ask them some qualitative and quantitative questions about the program and the viability of the solution in the community. And we essentially, as part of this pilot, provide a feasibility study on this technology as a solution to food waste right in your community, with real world examples of real residents using it and giving us their feedback. And then what we do at the end is, we'll provide this back to council as a report, and then we can look at designing an implementation program to expand it to more households if the results deem that appropriate. And there are grants available, federal, provincial, and some local as well. And we have support here at Food Cycle Science that can assist with leaning on those grants to get expansion programs up and running. And I want to give you some local examples of some of the pilots that we have done in Northwestern Ontario. So we have completed pilots in Kenora, Terrace Bay, Neebing, and Hornpain to date, and we have Fort Frances coming up, which we're very excited about. And some things that we've learned is that people are really caring about their greenhouse gas impact, and they really care about waste reduction to the tune of about 8 or 9 out of 10 on a scale. And when we ask them, having used the food cycler now for 12 weeks, did it motivate you to waste less food in the first place? And the overwhelming majority of people say that it did. Now, what this does when you're using the food cycler at home, you become really intimate with how much waste you're generating. And so you're aware, maybe I don't need to go and buy, that 3-pack of peppers. I only need just one. Maybe I didn't need to buy this much in the first place, or maybe I need to eat my leftovers, which I'm guilty of not doing. And this is a really, it's a qualitative benefit to the food cycler that's really hard to put into numbers, but it does have an impact as well, because we're saving people money on not buying as much groceries, and we're increasing awareness about the problem of food waste. And then when we asked our folks, would you recommend the food cycler to your friends, family, and neighbors? Do you think they would use it? The overwhelming majority said that they would recommend it. And when we asked, are you going to keep using your food cycler after the 12-week period, we've got 100% almost across the board, with 99% in Kenora. And then with the average user experience, we asked them to rate us out of 5. And the average lands between 4.7 and 4.75, which is a very generous user rating. And it's kind of in line with what you see, if you wanted to go and buy a food cycler yourself, you could do that on Vitamix.com. Our user ratings over the years are probably their highest rated product, which we're very happy to see. And here are some of the comments that our customers are saying. So these are pilot participants and municipal staff from our Northwestern Ontario partners. One person in Hornpain after the pilot said, "It's a great tool to reduce household waste. Appreciate that the municipality is being innovative and piloting different solutions." Now this speaks to the enjoyment of the program. We get an overwhelming feedback from people that they're grateful that their municipality has done something innovative. And we're happy to see that too. When we first started this municipal government solutions program, we weren't sure if small and rural communities would be willing to try new things, but what we've found is it's quite the opposite. They've been underserved in many ways for so long, and they're happy to see that there's something that really works for them and isn't too expensive either and that people like. Somebody in Nebing said, "I'm glad that Nebing has taken this initiative and hope that the program can be extended with wide participation." So we're working on that, more to come. And in Kenora, Kylie Hissa, who is the former Strategic Initiatives Officer, said, "It alleviates a lot of the concerns that people might have with backyard composting, the time commitment, the location, the pests and the animals and everything like that." So again, we're in Northern Ontario, right? We need to think about these things when we look at what we're going to do with our food waste. And so if you are interested in participating in a pilot program, here's kind of how they're laid out. So if you're just a regular consumer, you wanted to purchase a food cycler, you may do so. The retail price is $500. So through our municipal programs, what we offer is the technology at $300 per unit. And that $300 is then split between the municipal government and the residents who participate in the pilot program. We recommend like a 50-50 split, or maybe 125 for the municipality, 175 for the resident. It doesn't really matter. The goal of this is to make sure that this is accessible to everyone at well below market rates so that nobody is excluded and that everybody has some skin in the game. So if you're going to spend the time to set up this program and trial the technology, we want to make sure that we'll get your feedback and we'll really see and hear how it works right from the horse's mouth. And so depending on your population size, we have some pilot scope recommendations here and what the municipal investment might be. You'll get our contact information afterwards, of course, and if you're interested, please reach out, or if you have any other questions. And so we'll, our formal presentation portion is over here, and we want to see if you have any questions, and then we might open it up to a Q&A to hear your comments and feedback as well. So we had one question in the chat, so I'm just going to get to that first. Chuck asked, any success in getting other MUSH sectors to buy in? Hospital kitchens generate significant waste, same with university cafeterias, housing and Aboriginal housing to supply tenants. So yes, we do have technology at the larger scale meant for large food waste generators like hospitals and universities. Those are more of kind of a B2B business dealing, so not quite what we're trying to do in communities, but we certainly have that technology and those solutions, and our food cyclers are active in hospitals and universities across the world. And then with Aboriginal housing and DSSAB, which I'm not sure what that is, but we do have a community over here near Ottawa called the Mohawks of Akwesasne, and we did a pilot program with them that was 100% funded by the federal government with 100 households. And so we've done that, but not specifically in housing, just in the community wide. District Social Services Administrative Board. Well, thank you for that. I hope that answers the question, and that we'll open it up here to see if anybody else has any comments or questions.
I think Erwin has his hand up, Christina.
All right, Erwin.
Yes, thanks, Christina and Amy, for your presentation. Appreciate it. One of the questions that I've been asked is, why do I subsidize users of this through my municipal taxes? And if they don't partake in the pilot program or, the food cycle. And my answer to them is, we have 2 landfills in Nebing that are under, looking for expansion. And so one is basically done. But one of the disconcerting things about the one we're just basically finishing, waiting for MOE approval, is that we now had to basically almost put a yearly monitor on it, because the material, whatever that's passing through the ground, is moving faster through the attenuation zone than they had anticipated. So that's probably roughly between a $10,000 to $15,000 cost. So that if pretty much every household in Nebing decided to participate in the program, that we could probably alleviate that cost somewhat with regards to monitoring costs. And so I think, that anybody that's questioning that, subsidizing, my neighbor because he's using it, should think a little bit about what they're saying, because when you talk about landfills, most people's eyes glaze over. They have no interest. Just dig a hole and throw it in there. That's not the answer. We found out because the municipality had 2 letters of non-compliance, one in 2007, which they ignored, and in 2017, which we had to act on. So it's, there's a huge ongoing cost with looking after landfills. If we have to close a dump now, we were told $1 million in 10 years. Well, that number is more closer to $3 million in 10 years, and we might not even end up with the landfill in Nebing. So keep those kinds of things in mind, people, when you start objecting to a program like this, which I think is very valuable. But the question I really wanted to ask is about the filters. During your last presentation to our council, you commented on refillable filters. What's the progress on that? And can we get the present filters into our municipal office to sell off to our people that are buying them, as opposed to trying to purchase them online or whatever the case may be? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Erwin. I'll just first comment on your, the comment from your resident that you had about paying for it. So, waste is a municipal responsibility, like I said, like it or not, and you're paying for that in many ways. The landfill, if you provide a collection service, and all of the things that go into managing that waste. When you're having food cyclers in the community, after probably 2.5 years, you actually result in a net savings on disposal. So after about 2.5 years, it's probably paid off, and then you're benefiting from it. So everybody benefits from that, because everybody is paying for the landfill and those services. And then to answer your question about refillables, yes, we have a wonderful update. So they are approaching the port in BC. They should be landing sometime in the next week or 2, and then they'll be available to you. So we can certainly set you up with that. So the refillables, what you'll have to do is get 2 new cartridges to transition over to the refillable model. And then all you have to do is buy bulk carbon that you can then screw off the top and pour it in anytime you need to change your filters. So much less packaging waste and much less cost to end users as well. So you should be able to get through a year to a year and a half of filter usage for about $50 in the community, which we're really excited about. So yeah, we'll be in touch about that, and we'll definitely get them over to you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. And so Martin asked in the chat, are consumables subsidized as well? So the 2 maintenance costs that are associated with our technology are electricity consumption, which is not subsidized, but is very little. And the other one is the filters. And so what we've done through our expansion programs, when we look at kind of rolling this out to a large number of people in the community, we've included the cost of filters in that. So it's all part of the program, all municipally funded, paid for by whatever grants we can access. And we'll set up bulk refill stations around the community. So when you need more carbon for your filters, you can just go to the station, refill it, and it's all part of the program. So yes, that is blended in, but not with the pilots. With the pilots, we just sell them kind of separate. And then once we look at those programs to expand, we include them. Thank you for the question. Are there any other questions?
Doug also has his hand up. Please go
All
ahead.
right.
Thanks. Very interesting presentation and very supportive. I have two questions. One relating the humidity. I assume I saw in an early slide it was 1 kilogram of waste is reduced to 100 grams. So presumably there's 900 grams of humidity. Is that released into the household on one cycle? Or what happens to you're removing dewatering essentially is what I'm taking. What happens to that humidity?
Yeah, great question. So it uses a heating and grinding application, kind of layman's terms. And so you have a little bit of steam that comes out of the back of the machine through the carbon filters. So there's no water output or anything like that. And the steam can just go into the air. It's odorless as long as your filters are up to date. We just recommend that you keep it, a few inches off the wall so that it doesn't, ruin your paint or bubble it or anything like that.
Yeah, so I think that each occupant of a home produces about the equivalent of that, a kilogram of humidity into the home. So it would have to be something that's monitored. If you're running 2 or 3 cycles a day, you're adding to your home humidity levels in the wintertime. That could be interesting if there's any observations. The other one is landfill. One of the things that's happened in landfills, ours for sure, is as we recycle more and separate out different wastes, most of what's going into the landfill, it's a much mushier product. It's very hard to work in the landfills to spread, compact, etc. So this would be a great step forward there. I'm wondering if this question, you take your product and you reduce the organic waste to this 100 grams of dry. If it's not reused, what's the downside of sending that to the landfill? Because it certainly helps the landfill in terms of reduction of mush. It's not the optimum use of this product, but is there a downside other than that?
The downside is that it will still generate methane gas because it still is food, even though it's dehydrated. The benefit is that it's significantly reduced in weight and volume, so bringing it there is easier, whether that's a truck or self-haul, but it does still generate that methane gas. So it's certainly not our most ideal, end place for it to end up.
So what do you have other alternative what are the alternatives if sending that product to the landfill might be the worst thing to do? Is there a sort of a spectrum of better, best?
Yeah, the best thing is to feed it back into the earth. So if you're lucky enough to have a garden or some soil in your yard, mix it in with the soil, and it's very rich in nutrients. So your plants and fruits and veggies and whatever you're growing will love it and be very healthy. You can also donate it to a local farm. So I mentioned earlier in the presentation, and Emmy did as well, we've set up kind of a community drop-off program in Hornpain where anybody can bring it to the Easton Acres farm there if they're not looking to use it. And then what we love is that you can also pelletize it to be used in home heating. So make it into briquettes, throw it right into the fire. I throw it loose into the fire at my cottage. It still burns well, and that's fine. And then the other thing is you can mix it in with leaf and yard waste systems or existing organic services, though I doubt the people on this call have that organic service already set up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your questions.
Yeah, and just to add on that, because it is odorless and sterile, you can actually bin it during the winter. So I live in an apartment. So what I do is I bin it up in a big container, and then in the spring, I just go to my family's house and donate to the garden because it doesn't smell, it doesn't do anything. It's completely sterile and pathogen free. So you can bin it up, and we have a lot of residents that do kind of pile it up for the winter, and then they just find other ways to donate it during the spring and the summer. So there are many different ways of getting rid of your food waste, and we're hoping to find ways that you can use it as a valuable resource instead of waste. So we're very open to finding solutions within your communities to find something that works.
Yeah, good point. So what I have at my place is a 5-gallon pail that I got from Home Depot or Canadian Tire for $5. I'll fill that up in 3 months, 4 months. So it gets me through the winter, and it just sits in the basement, dry, sterile, odorless, and then I can use it when I start to garden in the spring. Any other questions? All right, well, I think we're approaching the end of our time here anyway, so I'd like to thank you very much for listening to us today and engaging and asking some questions. And thanks, Andrea, once again for having us.
Thanks, Christina. That was absolutely great. And if you didn't come to the NOMA conference, I would like to just make a mention. You were a very hot table at our section. And thank you again for giving away a second food cycler because it was so popular. That was amazing. So I missed out. Next time.
We'll catch you at the next one.
Yeah, but